Age of Sigmar has a lot of factions, and it can be very difficult to decide which one you want to play. So to help you make that choice, I'm going to be covering all of the factions in this series so that you can answer the question, should I play this faction? Today we are talking about the Blades of Khorne, who just had a brand new battletome released as well as a brand new model, making this an excellent time to get into the faction. On top of that, the playstyle of the army is changing to become more representative of the lore of the faction, and so we'll talk about how this is happening and what it means for the faction later on in the video. The Blades of Khorne are the Chaos faction that represents the blood god Khorne. These mortals and demons live for carnage, and they sweep across the mortal realms seeking to please their god by spilling blood in his name. The more anger they feel, the better, and even should their Khorne allies fall, each warrior will be empowered, for Khorne cares not from whence the blood flows, only that it flows. The plan for this video is to break down common questions about the faction, the playstyle, and the types of models, and how you might even get started in this army, and more. So let's get to it. To start the video off, we're going to talk about the playstyle of the Blades of Khorne. The Blades of Khorne are a melee-focused faction. Khorne has a total disdain for wizards and magic, and so spellcasting is out of the question. However, the faction does feature some priests who can empower allies and cause damage and carnage of their own. They can also summon fearsome manifestations to roam the battlefield and aid the slaughter. So do not expect to have a big shooting phase when playing Blades of Khorne. They do not have very much shooting to speak of at all, except for one artillery piece, the Skull Cannon, but even that wants to get into close combat if possible. And there are some heroes that also have some small shooting attacks as well, but really, this is a faction that simply wants to get into combat and fight it out at close range. The Blades of Khorne have had a full rewrite of their faction rules for the new battletome that just released. So previously, this army had a points-based system that allowed you to use one-off abilities, including a very techy movement ability that made Blades of Khorne pretty difficult to play against. The point system, aka the Blood Tithe system, is still present in the new book. Anytime a unit dies, whether it's an enemy unit or a friendly unit, you will get a Blood Tithe point, and these points can now be spent to unlock permanent buffs. Think about a skill tree from an RPG video game. That's basically what we are talking about here. Throughout the game, you unlock more buffs, and depending on which skills you take, you will unlock different skills further down the tree. This means that the faction has some variability to tech into certain matchups, or even just to be played differently for variety. Some of the buffs that you choose might be better for certain units that you pick to be part of your army, and so that will also add to the complexity of list building before you even get into a game. Additionally, once half the total units on the battlefield have died, and this counts your units and your opponent's units, you will unlock another army trait called Blood Drenched. This activates another set of passive buffs that affects all of your units. It does have one downside. It prevents you from buffing the save rolls of any of the units in your army going forward from that point. But the payoff is increased damage for most of your units through critical hits, to increase the rend for your demons, and to increase damage for all of your monsters. And so this is a super power-up offensively at the cost of some defense. These traits are really cool and thematic. It encourages Blades of Khorne players to rush into battle and die while fighting, and as more and more units die, copious amounts of blood will have been spilled onto the battlefield, and this in turn empowers your entire army. It makes your opponent think twice about who they want to get into combat with, and even more scared about whenever you actually kill one of their units, as you also build up more Blood Tithe points. There is a feeling that the new Blood Tithe buffs are less impactful than the previous system, and that the army is going to suffer in the meta for it, but the book is very new and lots of players are still playtesting and figuring out how this army will work best. The majority of the army also had their points drop, which means you can take more units in your army when list building than you could previously. Now let's talk a little bit about how army customization options can affect the way that you play Blades of Khorne. This army has 4 different battle formations in the new battletome, and they allow you to change the style of your army ever so slightly. In the index rules prior to this battletome, there was more of a focus on playing demons or mortals in your Blades of Khorne list. There are still battle formations that push those archetypes, but overall I think the book lends itself more to mixing Khorne's forces all together, which is cool. One of the battle formations that you can pick from will allow a mortal bloodbound unit to attack after a demon is fought, chaining the combat activations together. Another formation allows you to consistently stack charge effect bonuses to get some really big charges in, but it requires that you have lots of cavalry units in your list because that's part of the effect. There's another battle formation that lets your bloodbound, which is again, those are your mortal beings, not your demons, that will give the bloodbound a higher chance to hit when they are attempting to steal an objective from your opponent. And finally, there is a formation that allows your demons to move at the end of the turn if they are no longer in combat. That means that they killed whoever they were fighting, or that you used an ability like Power Through to move away. Basically, this battle formation is very interesting because it does potentially give you a lot of mobility to disrupt your opponent's plans, to score some points, or to move towards the next battle. Blades of Khorne are one of the oldest factions in the game, and they don't get a ton of support these days. So for example, this most recent update included only a single new model, and that was replacing old models that were leaving the range. They did make some older models more widely available, but the fact that they weren't already widely available says something as well. So what you're getting in this army are 18 heroes and 11 non-hero units. So we're going to talk about the brand new hero, the Deathbringer, which replaces two previous Deathbringer heroes that are no longer supported in the game. This bulky foot hero has a pretty lethal weapon with damage 3, which is rare for a foot hero. He also has two very useful abilities. First, he has a chance to cancel any enemy commands issued near him, which is very, very impactful. He also has another ability that allows him to execute an enemy model from a unit that he is fighting, or to destroy a manifestation outright. Anti-manifestation tech is a very important asset for this faction, as Blades of Khorne have no wizards, and if you want to be able to deal with manifestations, you need a few different ways to destroy them, and ideally without actually having to fight them. Let's take a moment to talk about all the other models that you can look forward to building and painting for your Blades of Khorne army, and we're going to start with the heroes. So first up is the named hero Skarbrand, which is the flightless bloodthirster. He's got a 4 damage weapon, and wait for it, an 8 damage weapon. Just insane damage stats. He's one of the coolest models in this army, hands down. Now, aside from Skarbrand, there are some unnamed heroes as well, and we're going to look at the demon unnamed heroes first, and we'll start with the Bloodthirsters. So Skarbrand is a Bloodthirster. We have some unnamed Bloodthirsters. These are giant demons that people often take entire armies of. There is a Wrath of Khorne Bloodthirster, a Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage, and a Bloodthirster of Unfettered Fury. Skarbrand and each of these unnamed Bloodthirsters are pretty epic, but they're going to cost almost a fourth of your entire army list, and each Bloodthirster has a specific target that they're strongest against, whether that's a hero, monsters, or infantry, but the baseline for all of the Bloodthirsters is a lot of rend and a lot of damage. Now, to round out your demon heroes, we also have the Skull Taker, we have the Bloodmaster Herald of Khorne, which you can build on foot or on the Blood Throne, and then there is Karanak, the Hound of Vengeance, Khorne's personal flesh hound. Your mortal bloodbound heroes are the Bloodstoker, who whips your units into a frenzy, allowing them to run and charge, the Mighty Lord of Khorne, who buffs your mortal infantry units and heroes with unique buffs. There's the Blood Secrator, which is another foot hero that helps troops rally, but also has a powerful once per game attack buff. The Realmgore Ritualist is a priest, but also turns an objective or a terrain feature into a rune-etched idol to Khorne, powering up nearby bloodbound units. We also have the Skull Grinder, who has a chance to fight before his enemies can react. He also has a permanent rend buff that he can give to another mortal hero. Next up is the Slaughter Priest, who can unbind wizard spells, a vital technique as many Khorne armies will have only a few ways to unbind enemy spells. The Slaughter Priest also wounds nearby units, friendly or otherwise, to aid in its prayers. And then finally, we have the Deathbringer, who is the new hero that we talked about earlier. For non-hero models, Blades of Khorne has access to the following demon units. Bloodletters are your standard demon infantry, Blood Crushers are your demon cavalry, and the Skull Cannon, which is your artillery piece. And then you also have Flesh Hounds, which are your demon tactical dogs and wizard hunters. There are a lot of non-hero bloodbound, aka mortal units that you can run in your army as well, including the Blood Warriors, which are your classic Khorne Marines. These elite troops have very solid health and a 3+ save, allowing them to stick out a fight. They have respectable damage that increases as the game progresses and your buffs activate. We also have the Mighty Skull Crushers, which are Blood Warriors on mounts. Their fearsome Juggernaut steeds can deal even more damage than the riders can at times. Then there are the Blood Reavers, which are lightly armored fighters coming in at 120 points cheaper than the Blood Warriors are, which gives you an idea of how many stats you're losing. They're very easy to kill, but if your opponent does kill them, great, that's a Blood Tithe point for you. Wrathmongers are another infantry unit that buffs other bloodbound units while in combat, but also have a chance to whip your enemy into a frenzy, making them attack their allies or even themselves. And then we have the Skull Reapers, a powerful 5-man infantry unit that can deal heavy damage and take objectives from opponents. Finally, we have the Claws of Karanak, a warband devoted to the Hound of Vengeance. This scouting unit can move in the deployment phase, helping you capture objectives and score battle tactics. They also partner with Karanak or Fleshhounds so that you can buff them to increase their critical hit chance. We do have one more model to talk about, which is the monster unit Khorgorath. This fearsome creature doesn't quite have the damage profile you'd hope for a big monster, but it does have several unique abilities to shut off enemy commands and to decrease the control score for enemies that are in combat with it. I'm not going to do a deep dive into the lore of the Blades of Khorne for this video, but if you're interested about their lore, you can check out my Every Age of Sigmar Faction Explained in 24 Minutes video for an introduction to the faction. From what I've seen in an online discussion and in some tier lists, the Blades of Khorne can be a difficult faction to paint. I do think it depends on what you are painting. Many of the demons will be easy to get onto a tabletop standard because you only need a few colors to do so. Some of the infantry models like the Blood Warriors have a ton of armor, which can just be all one color, probably red. But there are lots of different models with tons of trim, and there is a lot of exposed skin in this faction, which new painters typically find tougher to paint. Looking at all the models again as I write this, I actually think Khorne is harder to paint than I would have expected. All the accessories, the trim, the skulls, etc., it all adds up, and there is a lot to cover. However, this is a very gory faction, which means you can be messy and it will look good. These do not and possibly should not be very clean miniatures. Next, we'll talk about where the Blades of Khorne fall on the scale of elite to horde army. This is an interesting discussion because you can play the army a few different ways. For example, if you bring 4 Bloodthirsters to a game, that's going to be an elite army with high damage and high health. However, you could build a very large army with some of the more fragile infantry units. As they all march off to die, your Blood Tithe points are going to stack up. The average army, however, is going to be somewhere in the middle. For example, the Blood Warriors are 200 points and the Bloodletters are 170. So those are much higher than your average infantry, and they generally have stats to match. They have powerful attacks, solid defenses, and while not every single one of Khorne's units are going to be hitting on elite stats, many of them do, and many of them do have very good damage. So essentially you can go for a few elite Bloodthirsters to a smaller, more elite infantry and cavalry army to a massive group of infantry if you so choose. Khorne is a very interesting army when it comes to buying models. Like I said previously, you could just buy 4 Bloodthirster demons for $200 Canadian, which is they're actually 168 USD per model, and you would almost be done an entire army. You would still need to get a few more small units to fill up the rest of your points, which would be another couple $100 depending on what you buy, but right there, that's $1,000 Canadian for an army, and you don't get any flexibility out of it. I'd only recommend this route to a diehard Bloodthirster fan. It does have the advantage of being quick to play, which makes it a very fun tournament army. Now, there is also an Army of Renown in the new Battletome that lets you use only Bloodthirsters. And if you don't know what an Army of Renown is, it's basically a special army that you can build using specific rules from the Battletome. And these rules typically limit who can be in the army. And when you follow those restrictions, you get all new faction abilities, formations, enhancements, and prayers, etc. And typically it helps aid that playstyle. There is another Army of Renown in the new Khorne Battletome that is very popular right now, although many people think that it could be nerfed as it's currently crushing tournaments. Rather than all Bloodthirsters, this is an all blood-bound heroes, so no non-heroes, no demons, it's just all human heroes. Each hero has extra defensive padding in the form of a 4-up ward, and every single time a hero dies, they have a chance to shirk death and actually just stay on the battlefield instead. So in this case, you would actually need to buy a lot of foot heroes. This would easily add up to about 15 to 18 heroes, which would cost you about $700 to $800 Canadian or $500 to $600 USD. I would not recommend targeting this army either because it probably will get nerfed in some way, or even if it didn't, you're just going to be stuck with way more heroes than you'll ever know what to do with in any other Khorne list. However, if narratively you really love all of the all hero idea, then you do you. That's one option for you. Okay, so where does that leave us? Well, we can look at some older Khorne lists and we can see what those are priced at. This is going to be an estimation. Khorne's points went down a bit with the new book, so my research is likely going to show me lower prices for armies because these older tournament lists will have less models in them than the new lists. But points are always changing, so at the end of the day, all I can do is estimate an army price. It's very difficult to find a current tournament list with the new book to figure out this estimation for a couple of reasons. One, the battletome just came out and people are still figuring out what works, and so it hasn't really been in a lot of tournaments. And two, this Gore Chosen Army of Renown that we talked about is being run like crazy, and that's basically all I'm seeing online right now. So with all of that said, after doing some research online, picking out some lists and pricing them out, it would cost about $900 Canadian or $650 US to build a regular standard Blades of Khorne army. This includes buying your Khorne manifestation models and the faction terrain model. We can also look at some of the bundles and speculate on whether they are worth it. So there is a brand new Spearhead, which is currently going for $175 Canadian, which comes with Karanak. It comes with the Claws of Karanak warband and then 10 Fleshhounds, which is 2 units. This is a really cool Spearhead because it basically is one box that builds out the scouting part of your full Khorne army. Once you buy this, you've got all the scouts you're going to need. Your Claws of Karanak with their pregame move, with their 6-inch movement, which is really good, and then the Fleshhounds, which also have a really great movement as well. And so this is a pretty good purchase in my opinion because these types of units can really, they're pretty cheap to put into your army and they can really help out in a lot of different ways. So this seems like a really good purchase. There's also a new Regiment of Renown, which comes with a Slaughter Priest, 5 Skull Reapers, which you could build as Wrathmongers, and then 10 Blood Reavers. So Slaughter Priests are also very, very good. The Skull Reapers and Wrathmongers are fine, and they definitely see play. The Blood Reavers are kind of a chaff unit, and you may not see them in every list, and a lot of times you might even want to reinforce them. So this one is a potential to buy too, but I don't actually think you need to. What I do like about it is that it's actually a pretty cheap box at $110. They also put up the old Gore Blade Warband from the beginning of Age of Sigmar for $120 Canadian, which is a really good price. It's sold out right now. I don't know if they're going to restock it, but you actually get a lot here because you get a Mighty Lord of Khorne, a Blood Secretor, and a Bloodstoker, and a Korgorath. So that's 3 heroes and a monster. You also get 10 more Blood Reavers, and then you get 5 Blood Warriors. The problem here is that you want 10 Blood Warriors. They come in units of 10, so that the 5 Blood Warriors doesn't really help you unless you can proxy 5 more. But you do get the 3 heroes. The Korgorath I don't think looks very good in my opinion. I could be very wrong. Somebody correct me in the comments. And the Blood Reavers, again, if you buy this, if you're just going heavy on boxes right now, then yeah, you'd have 20 Blood Reavers once you bought the new Regiment of Renown and this Warband as well. I still like this because you get the 3 heroes and because you get Blood Reavers, but it's not as great as getting some of the other boxes. Although I do think it's pretty hard to find the Mighty Lord of Khorne and the Korgorath, and so this might be one of the only places that you can get them. However, we can also go and look online for the old Vanguard box. This is what preceded the new Spearhead box, and so if you buy this, you get a Slaughter Priest, which again are very good. You get 3 Mighty Skull Crushers, which is a pretty awesome cavalry unit. You get 10 Blood Warriors, and you get 10 Blood Reavers. So Blood Reavers seem to be in everything. This box is really good, and this one you could actually buy too, because one common factor I saw is that Blood Warriors often get reinforced. Mighty Skull Crushers can get reinforced as well, or you could run 2 units of 3. And so that's not bad to buy 2 of those. You get an extra Slaughter Priest that way, and then you have a bunch of Blood Reavers if you want. So when we're looking at all of these boxes, I actually think the old Vanguard and the new Spearhead, if you bought those two, that would actually be pretty good. If you bought the old Vanguard, the new Spearhead, you would just do one of each and then maybe get the Regiment of Renown if you're really a spender and you want to just get all the value. But at the end of the day, it looks like for this army that you're going to have to get out of these value boxes a bit to get some of these other units. In particular, if you wanted to get into the demon side of the army, you're going to have to get out of the value boxes and buy some demons. Next, we're going to talk about the general stats that you might see in this faction, and I'm going to be discussing some averages here. So what I might say won't hold true for every single specific unit in each group, but it's going to give you a general idea of how this army plays and what stats you're going to get in this faction. So first off, we're going to talk about demons, and we're going to start with the Bloodthirsters. They all have a respectable 4+ save, but also a 5+ ward and then 16 health. This isn't the tankiest monster around, but they can take a hit and survive and bash back. Unless you really expose them to an enemy's main hammer unit that's been buffed up, then they actually could get wiped off the board in one attack. But you'd really have to expose them for that to happen. So you want to be on the front foot here, basically attacking on your turn so they attack first, and you want the target that they hit to be pretty important for your enemy's army. So Bloodthirsters generally hit on 3s and 2s, and they have 2 random 4 to 5 damage. And like I said earlier, Scarbrand has even higher damage levels. If you're new to Age of Sigmar and you're not sure what this means, I'm saying that Bloodthirsters hit like trucks. So now the regular Bloodthirsters can fly, they have big wings, and they can have a 12-inch move. And one of them even has a 3rd charge dice, which means it can do an extra long charge, making it very easy to get them into combat. Scarbrand, on the other hand, betrayed Khorne. He attacked him from behind, and as punishment, Khorne shredded Scarbrand's wings and made him even more insane. The result is that he deals tons of damage, but he has no fly keyword, and he only has an 8-inch move. So he deals way more damage than the other Bloodthirsters, but has a harder time getting into a fight. Now looking at your Bloodletter demons, they generally have a 4+ save or worse, but all demons in the army have at least a 6+ ward, which is really good. On average, these demons are going to hit on 3s and wound on 3s, which is very strong, and they might have less rend than the Bloodthirsters, and they only deal 1 damage on average, but many of them have crit mortals, which means their damage is more consistent, but it's also more reliable against tough defenses. The Bloodletter infantry can move 5 inches, which is just an average move, but your cavalry can move 10 inches, and the Skull Cannon, surprisingly, is very mobile for artillery at 8 inches. The Fleshhounds are a little worse off in terms of stats because they hit on 4s and they wound on 3s, but they also have a 6-up ward, but not a good save. The Fleshhounds are mobile units with 8 inches of movement, and their job is to harass the enemy, score points, take out other screening units, or even just screen your own armies. Just don't expect them to survive too long. The mortal units, the Bloodbound, are a little bit all over the place. The heroes, if they have armor, will have a 3-up save, but many have a worse save. They don't have a ward, but many of the foot heroes have more than the average 5 health that you would see an other army get for their foot heroes. But these are still foot heroes, and so they just will die easily, so you have to be very careful with them. Most of the combat profiles on these Khorne heroes are pretty good. They mostly hit on 3s and wound on 3s, and there's an occasional 4 in there for certain heroes, but they also do pretty okay damage. There's nothing crazy except for maybe the Mighty Lord of Khorne, who has Rend 2 and Damage 2, and then the Deathbringer, which we talked about, has Damage 3. Moving on to our Bloodbound non-heroes, they are also all over the place, so I'll just kind of describe the type of units that you're getting rather than their exact average stats. These are mostly humans, which means they have that like 5-inch average move, and the cavalry have 10-inch move, which is not bad. When you look at the Armored Blood Warriors infantry and the Mighty Skullcrusher cavalry, you have some pretty elite defensive stats and a lot of health. The Blood Warriors have a 3+ save, and the Mighty Skullcrushers have a 2+ save, which is very rare in Age of Sigmar. They both have decent damage, and just based on the volume of attacks that they can provide, these are very bulky units that you can use as hammers, but then if they stay in combat, they're going to be anvils for the rest of your units, with the Blood Warriors having even more potential to stick around because they can get a 5+ ward. The Blood Reavers are a horde unit. They're going to be, units of 10 to 20. They're not going to do very much damage. They only have 1 health each, and they have a 6+ save, so they're going to die incredibly quickly. The other human infantry in this army will hit on 4s, which is not ideal, but they have a decent number of attacks and can spike damage and provide buffs and debuffs depending on what's on their war scroll. So in summary here, you've got a ton of damage in a lot of volume of attacks in this army, and you have a lot of buffs, keywords, and things that will turn on throughout the game that will make your units deal even more damage. You have some tanky units, and I would say on average, this army is tankier than some other armies. But you also have some cheaper units that die quickly, which could be to your advantage to generate some blood tithe points. You also have access to giant monsters that can wreak devastation, but you have to pick your moments, because if you are on the wrong side of an enemy charge, then they can disappear, and that's 400 plus points gone. I hope this video has helped you decide whether or not Blades of Khorne is going to be your first ever, or maybe just your next army that you are going to play in Age of Sigmar and Khorne veterans. Let me know if I missed any information that you want to share with some prospective new Blade of Khorne players. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you all soon in another video.